Welcome back to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. My name is Andrew Erickson, and today we're going to be breaking down 10 players and matchups to avoid for Week 13. But first, if you want a chance to win a signed Justin Jefferson Minnesota Vikings jersey, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now, comment below on this video, and that's it. Make sure to turn on those notifications to know when new videos drop and to find out if you've won. Now, let's get to those line-up landmines. The first matchup to avoid is Tom Brady versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, the GOAT has a brutal matchup in Week 13 against the Saints. Their defense is allowing the 8th fewest passing yards per game to quarterbacks, and since Week 7, they've allowed the fewest passing yards allowed per game at 192. Considering the loss of stud tackle Tristan Wirfs, and the fact that TB12 hasn't finished as a top 12 fantasy quarterback since Week 5, he needs to be avoided. He scored 9 fantasy points versus New Orleans back in Week 2. Next up, Devin Singletary at the New England Patriots. Singletary finished Thanksgiving with 14 carries for 72 yards, but only saw 1 target despite running a route on 67% of the dropbacks. Meanwhile, number 2 running back James Cook saw a whopping 5 targets on just 9 routes. The 65% 2-year share for Singletary was similar to what we saw in Week 11, with Cook getting more involved, but this week it was as a receiver. Singletary is still seeing the vast majority of snaps, 78% snap share in Week 12, but his grip on the high-value touches is starting to loosen, with Josh Allen reclaiming goal line rushing attempts. That will make Singletary very tough to trust versus one of the league's best run defenses in New England for Week 13. The Patriots are allowing the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. They've allowed just 1 rushing touchdown to an opposing running back this season, and just last week, they held Dalvin Cook to 42 rushing yards on 22 carries. His -8 total rushing EPA ranked dead last among all rushers in Week 12. Hayden Hurst versus the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs rank first in the NFL in fewest fantasy points allowed to tight ends from inline this season. Hayden Hurst ranks 4th in the NFL in routes run from inline. Only 11 of his 57 targets, that's 19%, have come from the slot this season, where Casey has given up the majority of its fantasy production to tight ends. Not to mention, the return of Jamar Chase figures to cap Hurst's target ceiling, making him a floor play at best, and a game that has a chance for some fireworks with a 52.5 projected total, the highest number on the Week 13 slate. Next up, Jeff Wilson Jr. at the 49ers. Jeff Wilson got the RB1 treatment against the Houston Texans in Week 12, seeing all the running back touches before he exited the game. But Week 13 figures to be very different. His fantasy ceiling won't be easily attained versus the San Francisco 49ers' stout run defense. They rank 1st in the fewest rushing yards allowed and 2nd in fewest fantasy points allowed per game to running backs. San Fran also ranks 1st in DVOA versus running backs in the passing game, making Wilson's revenge game projection likely bittersweet, even as the team's clear-cut lead running back. Latavius Murray at the Baltimore Ravens. Since Week 6, the Baltimore Ravens have completely shut down opposing running games. They rank 5th in fewest fantasy points allowed, facing the lowest number of rushes per game at 14, allowing just 36 rushing yards per game, the best mark in the NFL over that time frame. With the Broncos' abysmal 15-point implied team total bottom in Week 13, forecasting another tough day at the office for Denver's offense, Latavius Murray should be avoided where possible. Next up, Saquon Barkley versus the Washington Commanders. Saquon Barkley has been bottled up over the last 2 weeks. He has just 1 carry over 10 yards and 0 of 15-plus yards. He's averages 16 touches per game and 2.3 yards per carry. And his fantasy outlook does not look great against an elite Washington Commanders run defense. They rank 3rd in run defense EPA, 4th in fewest fantasy points allowed running backs, and 5th in rushing touchdown percentage allowed. Their defensive line will also be getting a major boost in the form of Chase Young, presumably returning to the starting lineup. Adam Thielen versus the New York Jets. The Jets have allowed the fewest fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers since Week 6. They rank 5th in DVOA versus number 2 wide receivers, allowing the 6th fewest receiving yards, 40 yards per game, to opposing number 2s. Adam Thielen has just an 18% target share since TJ Hockenson joined the team, as Kirk Cousins' number 3 pass-catching option when all 3 guys are healthy. It's a bad spot to rely on the boomer-bust Thielen to deliver even after his big Thursday night performance. Alvin Kamara at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Buccaneers' run defense is no joke when they had defensive tackle Akeem Hicks back in the starting lineup. Through weeks 1, 9, 10, and 12, when Hicks was fully healthy and playing, opposing running backs totaled 63 carries for 224 yards, 13.3 PPR points per game, 56 rushing yards per game at just 3.6 yards per carry. Considering how poor Alvin Kamara has played when facing tough run defenses like the Ravens, Steelers, Rams, and 49ers, over the last 4 weeks, I am not overly convinced he will be able to positively combat another tough matchup on the ground in Week 13. He hasn't finished higher than RB19 in the last month amid the aforementioned juggernaut schedule of tough run defenses. Michael Pittman Jr. at the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys boast the number 1 pass defense EPA this season. They've allowed the second fewest targets per game to number 1 wide receivers at 6.6, and the third fewest receiving yards per game at 52 receiving yards. And since week 6, Dallas ranks 5th in fewest receiving yards allowed to all opposing wide receivers. With a pass rush that figures to give Matt Ryan fits all day long, Pittman doesn't offer a massive fantasy ceiling in this spot after an impressive Monday night showing against a defense that ranked dead last in fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. The matchup boosted Pittman's output, which likely won't be the case on the road here in Week 13. And last but not least, my number 1 matchup to avoid this week, Miles Sanders versus the Tennessee Titans. When Miles Sanders scores in fantasy football, he's a great start. But when he doesn't, you are wishing you played somebody else. That's the case here in Week 13 with Sanders versus a Titans run defense that has allowed the fewest percentage of rushing touchdowns in 2022. They have the quintessential pass funnel defense that has faced the fewest number of rushing attempts and allowed the second fewest amount of rushing yards at just 3.7 yards per carry to running backs. It's a bad matchup that is clear as day, and Sanders has zero pass game upside or touchdown equity to fall back on him from being a major bust this week. Recall that he is not only competing for goal line touches with quarterback Jalen Hurts, but also with running backs Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. That completes my breakdown of 10 players and matchups to avoid for Week 13. If you like the video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe, and share with all your non-league mate friends. And before you go, if you want a chance to win a signed Justin Jefferson Minnesota Vikings jersey, courtesy of our friends at Pristine Auction, all you need to do is subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now, comment below in this video, and that's it. Make sure to turn on those notifications to know when new videos drop and to find out if you've won.
Thanks for tuning in to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at FantasyPros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.